I'll never forget the moment my father-in-law stood in his pristine backyard, dressed in a suit worth thousands, and told me I should feel lucky they were allowing me to sleep in their garage. At that exact moment, I was cradling his granddaughter in my arms. She was 8 months old, with eyes that mirrored her father's and a stubborn little chin she inherited from me. This man, surrounded by his meticulously landscaped property, actually expected gratitude for providing me a cot positioned next to gardening equipment. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 29 years old, and exactly 3 months before this confrontation, I made what I now recognize as the most catastrophic decision of my entire life. I agreed to move into my husband's family home after he received deployment orders to Germany. When Derek first presented this idea, it genuinely seemed logical. His deployment would last 14 months. We had a 5-month-old infant. His parents owned this enormous house with 3 unoccupied bedrooms just sitting empty. His mother, Veronica, actually shed tears when she extended the invitation. She spoke about wanting to help, about family supporting family through difficult times. What she conveniently omitted was her plan to transform me into their unpaid domestic worker, their verbal punching bag, and their personal source of unlimited funds. Derek and I had been married for 2 years, and we'd finally reached a point of financial stability. Our joint savings held $47,000, representing our carefully accumulated down payment for a starter home upon his return. Then I walked through the doors of the Lancaster family residence, and everything we'd built together began to evaporate. You recognize these houses immediately. Decorative columns adorning the facade that serve absolutely no architectural function. A circular driveway engineered specifically to impress passers-by. The type of residence that broadcasts wealth and success from the street, while quietly drowning in credit obligations behind closed doors. But it photographed beautifully, and I would soon discover that surface appearances were the only currency the Lancaster family truly valued. The initial 7 days proceeded smoothly enough. Veronica guided me to a comfortable guest bedroom. Her husband, Ronald, actually assisted with carrying my belongings upstairs. Even Derek's older sister, Victoria, stopped by with a homemade casserole as a welcoming gesture. I began questioning whether my private reservations about his family had been too severe. That optimism survived approximately 10 days. During the second week, the atmosphere shifted noticeably. Veronica casually mentioned the guest bedroom was actually being reserved for her sister's upcoming visit. Would I mind terribly relocating to the converted space above their garage? Purely temporary, she assured me with that practiced smile. Just until her sister departed, the space revealed itself as an unfinished storage area containing a camping cot and a portable heater that functioned about as effectively as a match trying to warm a warehouse. I'm reasonably certain I could have preserved frozen desserts up there without refrigeration, but I convinced myself this arrangement was temporary. Then they acquired my vehicle. Actually, they persuaded me to surrender it for supposed safekeeping. Veronica expressed concern about neighborhood vehicle thefts. She emphasized I wouldn't actually need transportation, since everything I required was available right there at the residence. And I, completely exhausted from sleepless nights with a colicky infant, handed over those keys like an absolute fool. I haven't operated that vehicle in 3 full months. I also lost access to our banking accounts entirely. Ronald somehow managed to add himself as an account holder and instituted a weekly allowance system. $40 per week for myself and an infant. Have you examined infant formula prices recently? The cost of diapers alone could inspire nightmares. The premium diapers that prevented skin irritation for baby Sophie cost approximately $28 per package. That left me roughly $12 for my own nutritional needs. I began skipping meals entirely so my daughter wouldn't go without proper nutrition. I lost 15 pounds my frame absolutely couldn't afford to lose. My cellular phone got transferred to their family plan as well, supposedly for convenience and cost savings. What they neglected to mention was this arrangement granted them complete access to monitor my communications. The single occasion I attempted to email Derek the actual truth about conditions here, Veronica discovered it on the family computer and permanently deleted it. Then she revoked my laundry privileges as punishment for my betrayal. I spent the following 2 weeks washing infant clothing like some character transported from a Victorian drama, while my knuckles cracked and bled from harsh detergent and frigid water. Approximately 2 weeks ago, Ronald decided their gutters required cleaning. More specifically, he determined I should be the one performing this task. His exact phrasing was that I needed to earn my accommodation here. So I ascended that unstable extension ladder, reached approximately 15 feet elevation, and the entire structure shifted beneath my feet. I desperately grabbed for the roof edge, missed completely, and descended hard directly onto my left ankle. The pain was absolutely searing, like someone had driven a metal spike straight through my foot. Veronica heard my scream of agony. She emerged, observed my ankle swelling to approximately the size of a small melon, and instructed me to simply walk it off. No medical evaluation, no ice application, just walk it off and stop being dramatic. So I hobbled around for 2 solid weeks performing household tasks on an ankle that transformed into spectacular shades of purple and yellow and produced sounds no human ankle should ever produce. Throughout this entire nightmare, I told absolutely no one outside that residence. My father, Thomas Mitchell, raised me alone after my mother abandoned our family when I was 7 years old. He dedicated his entire adult life to construction work. He built residential homes, he built commercial structures, he built me into the person I became. He taught me strength, independence, to never permit anyone to diminish my worth, and there I was, being systematically diminished into nothing. I couldn't tell him the truth. The shame and humiliation would have destroyed me. But last Friday afternoon, Dad decided to drive 200 miles to surprise his granddaughter for what he termed her unofficial 8-month birthday celebration. He arrived in the driveway precisely as I was limping across the front lawn. Sophie balanced on my hip, grocery bags cutting into my other hand. I had walked 2 complete miles to the store and back because I had no vehicle access. My ankle was screaming in protest, and my father witnessed absolutely everything. He observed me struggling up that driveway. Then he asked where my vehicle was located. I explained that Veronica had taken it for safekeeping, that I was fortunate they were permitting me to remain here at all. My father's expression cycled through approximately 7 distinct emotions in under 3 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, anger, fury, and finally something that frightened me more than all the others combined. Complete stillness, the kind of eerie calm that arrives immediately before a massive storm, makes landfall. He opened his truck door and spoke 4 words that altered everything. "Get in right now. We're handling this tonight." I had no comprehension what that meant, but the look in his eyes communicated that the Lancaster family had just created a very dangerous adversary, and Thomas Mitchell never lost confrontations, not ever. Before I continue, if this story is resonating with you, please hit that subscribe button and share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your location. I genuinely read every comment, and your engagement truly makes my day. Thank you so much for being here. Now, back to what happened next. My father drove us to a diner located 3 towns away. He explained he didn't want anyone reporting our conversation back to the Lancaster family. At that moment, I thought he was being somewhat paranoid. Later, I understood he was being tactical and strategic. Everything Dad did from that moment forward was carefully calculated. The man had invested 30, 5 years in union construction work. He absolutely understood how to handle bullies and manipulators, and the Lancaster family, he informed me over lukewarm coffee, were executing one of the oldest financial scams in existence. I told him absolutely everything that night. Every humiliation, every stolen freedom, every degradation. The words erupted like water from a ruptured pipe. 3 months of enforced silence finally shattering all at once. I told him about Victoria, Derek's older sister, who visited nearly every single day. Not to offer assistance, never to help. She came exclusively to report back to her mother about everything I was supposedly doing wrong. The dishes weren't sufficiently spotless. The baby cried too frequently. I wasn't adequately grateful for everything her generous family was sacrificing for poor little me. Victoria had never accepted me from our first meeting. I came from a working-class background. My father earned his living through physical labor. In Victoria's carefully constructed world, that made me fundamentally inferior. Dad listened without interrupting once. When I described Veronica monitoring my emails, his knuckles went white around his coffee mug. When I recounted the latter incident, I genuinely thought he might overturn our entire booth, but he simply nodded slowly and asked one single question. "What else haven't you communicated to Derek?" That's when I completely broke down, because I hadn't communicated a single truthful thing. Every video call occurred with his parents positioned directly in the room, listening and monitoring every spoken word. If I attempted to text something authentic, they examined my phone afterward. I was completely isolated from my own husband, cut off from the one person who could intervene. But the situation was actually worse than simple isolation. Veronica called Derek regularly on her personal phone, enthusiastically describing how wonderfully everything was proceeding, how content I seemed, how grateful I was for their generosity. She constructed a complete fabrication of me thriving, and Derek, stationed on a military base thousands of miles away with limited internet and absolutely no reason to question his own parents, believed every fabricated word. Dad asked about the banking account. I explained that Ronald controlled everything now. I received my $40 every Monday morning, and that was the complete extent of what I saw of our money. Dad asked if I still possessed login credentials. I said I believed so, though I'd never actually attempted to access it since moving into their residence. My father smiled then, not a happy smile, the kind of smile a chess master displays when they've calculated checkmate 3 moves ahead. He dropped cash on the table and announced we were going to a 24-hour copy center. A copy center at 11 at night is a genuinely strange environment. There was some individual in sleepwear making copies of something I deliberately chose not to examine too closely, and there was me accessing a bank account I hadn't viewed in 3 months. The numbers didn't make any sense initially. We should have had approximately $47,000. Derek's military salary had been depositing automatically twice monthly. There should have been substantially more accumulated by now, not drastically less. But the screen displayed $8,200, nearly $30. $9,000 had simply vanished without explanation. Dad positioned a chair directly beside me and said we needed to examine the complete transaction history. We printed page after page after page, and the story those pages revealed was absolutely horrifying. Transfers to something called Bella Boutique Enterprises. $15,000 transferred over 3 months. I had absolutely no idea what that entity was until Dad searched it and discovered Victoria's Instagram boutique. She'd been selling healing crystals and wellness products to vulnerable women online. Stones that genuinely appeared to come from a landscaping supply center. 0 legitimate customers, and apparently 0 moral qualms about funding it with stolen money. Cash withdrawals occurring every few days. Substantial ones, $500 here, $300 there, sometimes significantly more. The pattern matched Veronica's lifestyle perfectly. Her twice-weekly salon appointments, her shopping expeditions to stores I couldn't afford to enter, her elaborate lunches with church acquaintances where everyone pretended humility while comparing designer accessories under the table, marina fees and yacht club memberships. Ronald didn't even own a boat, but he enjoyed associating with people who did, funding his fantasy lifestyle with our money. And then Derek's credit card. Restaurant charges, bar tabs, country club fees, all local establishments, all recent transactions, all completely impossible for a man currently stationed in Germany. Ronald had been actively using his own son's identity while his daughter-in-law starved in his garage. My father said something I'll never forget as long as I live. He leaned back in that plastic chair and said he'd witnessed organized crime operations with more subtle accounting than this. He wasn't exaggerating whatsoever. The Lancaster family hadn't even attempted to conceal what they were doing. They were so utterly confident I would never check that they'd left a trail a legally blind accountant could follow. Dad was already on his phone. He had an acquaintance, a retired legal assistant named Helen Murphy, who owed him a substantial favor from years back. He was calling that favor in tonight because what the Lancaster family had done wasn't simply cruel or unethical. It was genuinely criminal. But first, we needed to reach Derek directly, without his parents filtering and monitoring every word. Helen Murphy arrived at that copy center at midnight, wearing fuzzy bedroom slippers and an old college sweatshirt. She looked like somebody's sweet grandmother arriving to bake cookies for the grandchildren. She was absolutely not there to bake cookies. Within approximately 5 minutes of reviewing our printed documentation, she'd identified 3 separate criminal charges the Lancaster family could potentially face: financial exploitation of a vulnerable person, fraud, and the significant one that changes everything, identity theft. Using Derek's credit card without his knowledge or permission wasn't simply disgusting behavior. It was a federal crime, and the military justice system takes financial crimes against active service members extremely seriously. Helen said the potential consequences were severe, prison time severe, but we had a complication to address. When I first moved into their residence, Veronica had me sign a stack of paperwork. Insurance forms, she'd called them. Emergency contact authorizations. I'd been absolutely exhausted with a 5-month-old who wasn't sleeping through the night. I signed whatever she placed in front of me without reading carefully. Who scrutinizes paperwork from their mother-in-law. One of those documents turned out to be a limited power of attorney granting Ronald authority over certain financial decisions. That's how he'd gotten himself added to our account so easily. He had my signature on legal paper. Never mind that I'd had absolutely no comprehension what I was actually signing. Helen asked if I'd signed willingly with full understanding of the implications. Had anyone properly explained what it was? Had I been given adequate time to read it carefully? No to all 3 questions. She made a detailed note. Fraud can occur when consent is obtained through deliberate deception or misrepresentation. This situation might absolutely qualify under that definition. Dad asked about reaching Derek directly without the Lancaster filter intercepting everything. Helen agreed it was absolutely critical. If Derek didn't know what was actually happening, he needed to hear the truth from his wife first, not from lawyers or criminal investigators later. The problem was pure logistics. Derek had extremely limited internet access on base. Every phone number I had for him, his parents knew about as well. If I called through normal channels, Veronica would discover it within hours and construct some new elaborate lie. That's when Dad pulled out his ancient flip phone. The man absolutely refuses to upgrade technology. He says smartphones are for people who don't have enough genuine things to occupy their minds. But that night, his technological stubbornness saved us. He scrolled through contacts to a name from decades ago, Master Sergeant Benjamin Torres, an Army buddy who currently worked logistics coordination at bases across Europe, including Derek's current base in Germany. Dad made that call right there at the copy center. It was approaching 6 in the morning in Germany. They exchanged the kind of greetings old soldiers exchange with each other, brief, profane, and oddly affectionate underneath. Then Dad explained absolutely everything without embellishment. A message would be delivered directly to Derek. He would call a number his parents didn't know existed. It might take a day or so, but it would definitely happen. We left that copy center with a folder absolutely stuffed with evidence, and something I genuinely hadn't felt in 3 months. Hope, tiny and fragile, like a candle flame in a hurricane, but real and growing stronger. Dad drove us to a roadside motel. Not a nice establishment, the kind where the ice machine has been broken for decades, but it was warm, and it wasn't the Lancaster residence. Sophie fell asleep immediately in my arms. Infants sense stress in their caregivers. That night, with my father keeping watch by the window, she slept more peacefully than she had in months. I couldn't sleep at all, though. I lay there in that squeaky bed going over the numbers repeatedly in my mind. 15,000 to Victoria's Crystal Pyramid scheme. 8,000 in cash for Veronica's shopping addiction. Thousands more funding Ronald's yacht club fantasy. Money that was supposed to become our future home. Our daughter's security and stability just gone, stolen by people who were supposed to love and protect us. The phone call came at 2 in the morning. Unknown number on Dad's flip phone. When I answered, I heard the voice I'd been desperately missing for 3 months. Derek sounded confused initially. He'd gotten a strange message from someone he didn't know, instructing him to call this specific number urgently. Was everything all right? Was Sophie okay? Was I injured? I started crying before I could even stop myself. 3 months of holding everything together came pouring out in one overwhelming wave of emotion. And when I could finally breathe properly again, I told him absolutely everything, every single detail I'd been unable to share. When I finished, there was silence on the line. Long enough that I genuinely thought the call had dropped. Long enough that a terrified part of me wondered if he'd choose to believe his parents over me. Then Derek spoke. 4 words that put my shattered heart back together. I believe you, Sarah. He believed me without any hesitation, without demanding proof or evidence, without making excuses for his family's behavior. He believed his wife completely and unconditionally. Derek had questions after that, numerous questions. But then he told me exactly what he was going to do about this situation. First thing that morning, he was going directly to his commanding officer. Identity theft against a military spouse was taken incredibly seriously within the military justice system. His parents had committed federal crimes, and Derek fully intended to make absolutely certain they faced appropriate consequences. But that wasn't all he had planned for them. His father's 60th birthday celebration was scheduled for Sunday. The entire extended family would be attending. Neighbors, business associates, church acquaintances, everyone the Lancaster family had spent years carefully impressing with their perfect family image. What if, Derek asked carefully, he made a surprise video call during the celebration to wish his father happy birthday? What if that call didn't go remotely the way Ronald expected? I could hear the cold, controlled anger in my husband's voice. This wasn't simply about justice anymore. This was about exposure, about ripping away the carefully constructed mask and showing everyone the real monsters underneath. I told Derek I loved him more than anything. He said he loved me too, and then he said something that made me smile genuinely for the first time in 3 months. His father was about to experience the worst birthday celebration of his entire life. Saturday morning felt completely different somehow. Sunlight came through that cheap motel window like the universe itself knew the balance was finally shifting back. Sophie woke up smiling. reaching for my face with her tiny, perfect hands, completely unaware her mama was about to go to war for our family. Dad was already awake and dressed. I'm genuinely not sure he slept at all that night. He'd spent the dark hours making phone calls, coordinating what he kept calling the infrastructure of justice. The man had spent 35 years building physical structures. Now he was building something entirely different. The Lancaster family had absolutely no idea what they'd awakened when they decided to mess with Thomas Mitchell's daughter. Derek had been busy as well. He called around 6 in the morning his time, right after meeting with his commanding officer. The military absolutely does not appreciate identity theft committed against active service members. Derek's commanding officer listened to the entire story with an expression like approaching thunder, then connected him with military legal services immediately. Within hours, Derek had filed formal reports about the credit card fraud and the unauthorized account access. The wheels of military justice were turning now, and once they start moving, they're extraordinarily difficult to stop. The very first thing Derek did was freeze every single account. The joint savings, the checking account, his credit card, absolutely everything. Ronald would discover this soon enough when his next restaurant charge got publicly declined in front of his golfing companions. But by then, it would be far too late to matter. No more transfers to Victoria's Crystal Pyramid scheme. No more cash withdrawals for Veronica's shopping addiction. No more yacht club memberships funding Ronald's fantasy lifestyle. The financial bleeding had finally stopped completely, but freezing accounts was merely the beginning of Derek's plan. He wanted full accountability, and he had a very specific plan to achieve it. His father's 60th birthday celebration was tomorrow, Sunday afternoon. The entire extended Lancaster clan would be there, neighbors from the expensive houses nearby, business associates wearing expensive casual wear, church acquaintances bringing elaborate covered dishes. Everyone the Lancaster family had spent years meticulously impressing with their perfect family facade. Derek wanted to burn that carefully constructed image to the absolute ground in front of all of them simultaneously. The video call was actually my suggestion. I proposed to Derek that I'd pitch it to Veronica as a thoughtful surprise. She would absolutely adore having her military son beam in from Germany to publicly honor his father. She'd set up their enormous television in the main living room, gather all the guests for the touching moment, probably purchase professional lighting for perfect video quality, record everything for posterity. She'd think of absolutely everything except what Derek was actually planning to say. Helen came by the motel around noon with updates. Her detective acquaintance Nathan Cooper, who'd worked financial crimes for 20 years before retiring, had reviewed our evidence informally as a personal favor. He said there was substantially more than enough evidence for a formal criminal investigation. The power of attorney obtained through deliberate deception, the unauthorized withdrawals, the blatant identity theft. These weren't minor violations or civil matters. These were serious felonies with severe consequences. Nathan couldn't make arrests based purely on an informal evidence review, but he could do something almost equally valuable. He could show up at that celebration, ask pointed questions, make the Lancaster family extremely nervous in front of everyone they'd spent years impressing. The formal investigation would take time to build properly, but the questioning could happen immediately. And having a retired detective appear at Ronald's 60th birthday celebration, credentials visible, asking specific questions about financial irregularities, that would send a message far louder than any arrest warrant. Dad coordinated the precise timing. Nathan would arrive approximately 30 minutes into Derek's video call, right when the truth was finally sinking in for everyone, right when Ronald and Veronica were desperately scrambling for plausible explanations that didn't exist. Dad even practiced his innocent expression in the motel mirror that afternoon. He kept asking if he looked sufficiently trustworthy, like a friendly grandfather just there to support his daughter, not a man actively about to dismantle someone's entire reputation. I told him he looked absolutely perfect. He said I was a terrible liar, but he appreciated the effort anyway. I had to return to that house one more time, face Veronica directly, pretend absolutely nothing had changed, play the grateful daughter-in-law role for one final day. The thought made my skin crawl, but if they suspected anything at all, they might cancel the celebration entirely. They might destroy evidence. I needed them comfortable, confident, completely unprepared for what was coming. Dad drove me back around 4 that evening. Before I climbed out, I texted him the exact location where I'd hidden my packed bags in the garage, behind the old paint containers on the metal shelf near the lawn equipment. He'd retrieve them tomorrow, while everyone was distracted by the celebration chaos. Walking back through that front door was genuinely one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. Veronica met me at the entrance with her usual tight smile, the kind that never quite reaches the eyes. She asked where I'd been all day. I explained my father wanted some granddaughter bonding time. She seemed annoyed I'd left without explicitly asking permission first, but she had too much celebration preparation consuming her mind to push the issue further. I waited until she was arranging elaborate centerpieces before making my calculated move. I casually mentioned that Derek had called my dad's phone since mine had been malfunctioning recently. He wanted to surprise his father with a video call during tomorrow's celebration. Wish Ronald happy 60th birthday in front of all the assembled guests. You should have seen Veronica absolutely light up with excitement. For a brief moment, I almost felt bad for what was coming. Almost, she immediately started planning enthusiastically. The big television in the main living room, positioned right after the cake-cutting ceremony. She'd make absolutely certain everyone gathered properly. She'd even purchased professional lighting last month that would be absolutely perfect for this moment. It would be so incredibly special, she kept repeating enthusiastically. I smiled warmly and agreed completely. Oh yes, I said carefully. It would definitely be something everyone would remember forever. By the way, if this story is hitting close to home for you, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Your support genuinely helps me continue telling these stories. And trust me, what happens at that birthday celebration is absolutely something you don't want to miss. Sunday morning arrived absolutely gorgeous. Clear blue skies, gentle breeze, perfect temperature. Ronald's birthday celebration couldn't have asked for better weather conditions. The catering company arrived early that morning. The elaborate tent went up in the backyard. Fresh flowers decorated every visible surface. It looked more like an expensive wedding than a simple birthday celebration. But Ronald never did anything on a small scale. Veronica handed me a detailed list at 8 in the morning. 37 specific tasks to complete before guests began arriving. She spoke to me exactly like hired help. Actually, with less respect than hired help, because at least hired help receives actual payment. I completed every single task perfectly. Model daughter-in-law, invisible and efficient. The guests started arriving around 2 that afternoon. Business associates, neighbors carrying expensive wine bottles, church acquaintances with elaborate covered dishes. Victoria made her grand entrance in an outfit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe combined, kissing her parents like she hadn't seen them just 2 days earlier. I watched them all carefully. These people who'd smiled at me during holiday gatherings while I starved in their acquaintance's garage. These people who'd believed Veronica's lies about my supposed mental instability. In just a few hours, they would know absolutely everything. Ronald held court in the backyard, graciously accepting compliments on the celebration, the house, his successful life. He looked so confident, so secure, positioned at the center of his perfect world. I wondered if he'd recognize this moment later as the absolute last time he was ever truly happy. At 4 o'clock sharp, Veronica announced it was time for the special video call. Everyone should please gather in the main living room. Her military son was calling from Germany to wish his father happy birthday. This was going to be so incredibly special. She was absolutely right about that part, just not in the way she imagined. 3 people crowded into that living room. I counted them methodically. Counting gave me something concrete to focus on besides my pounding heart. Business associates positioned themselves up front, eager to be seen. Church acquaintances clustered near the expensive couch. Neighbors filled the remaining gaps. Ronald stood center stage, champagne glass raised high, beaming like a decorated hero about to receive another medal he actually deserved. Veronica connected the video call with a dramatic flourish. The enormous television filled with Derek's face. He wore his full dress uniform, looking every inch the proud military son. The room burst into enthusiastic applause. Someone whistled appreciatively. Ronald raised his champagne glass even higher toward the screen in salute. Derek smiled back, but something was fundamentally off about that smile, something cold lurking underneath the surface warmth. I was probably the only person in that room who noticed. I knew exactly what was coming. "Happy birthday, Dad," Derek said clearly. His voice was calm, controlled, almost eerily so. "I'm genuinely glad everyone could be here today, because I have some important things I need to say publicly." The room settled into expectant silence. Everyone anticipated a heartfelt tribute, a devoted son praising his wonderful father from across the ocean. That's not remotely what happened. Derek started with the money. He spoke clearly and without emotion, laying out facts like a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. $47,000. That's what he and his wife had carefully saved for their future, for their first family home, for their daughter's security and stability. $8,200. That's what remained in the account today. Someone in this room stole nearly $39,000 from his family while he served his country overseas. The room went completely, utterly silent. Ronald's confident smile froze unnaturally on his face. Veronica looked like she'd swallowed something genuinely rotten. $15,000 went to Bella Boutique Enterprises. Derek continued methodically. "That's Victoria's company, Dad, the one selling crystals on Instagram, the one that apparently needed my family's money to survive." Every single head in that room swiveled toward Victoria simultaneously. She'd gone absolutely pale underneath her expensive makeup. Her mouth opened and closed repeatedly like a fish suddenly yanked out of water. She looked desperately at her parents for rescue or explanation. None came at all. $8,000 in cash withdrawals, Derek said, matching Mom's spending habits perfectly. Her salon appointments, her shopping expeditions, her elaborate lunches with all you lovely church acquaintances gathered here today. The church acquaintances shifted extremely uncomfortably. A few looked genuinely appalled. Most just looked utterly fascinated, the way people can't look away from terrible accidents. Ronald's business associates were exchanging meaningful glances, doing mental calculations. If he'd steal from his own son, what might he do to business partners? But Derek absolutely wasn't finished yet. "There's also my credit card, the one I've never given anyone permission to use ever. Someone's been charging restaurant meals, country club fees, bar tabs, all local establishments, all while I've been stationed in Germany for months." His eyes found Ronald directly through the camera with laser focus. "Dad, would you like to explain how that's remotely possible?" Ronald's face had completely transformed. Confident to confused to angry to something I'd never seen before on him. Genuine fear, real undeniable fear. His mouth opened, probably to spin some elaborate lie. He never got the chance. The doorbell rang loudly. Veronica, operating purely on hostess autopilot, answered it automatically. Detective Nathan Cooper stood on the front porch, retired credentials clearly visible. He apologized politely for interrupting the celebration, said he was following up on a detailed report of serious financial irregularities. He had questions for Ronald and Veronica. It would only take a few minutes, unless they'd prefer continuing this conversation down at the station instead. The room absolutely erupted in chaos. Ronald's business associates suddenly remembered urgent appointments. Church acquaintances whispered frantically to each other. Neighbors edged toward exits, not wanting their names associated with whatever was unfolding. But everyone froze completely when Derek's voice cut through the chaos. "I'm not finished speaking yet." 50. 3 people stopped moving entirely. The detective stood in the doorway, watching carefully. Derek told them about me then. The unfinished garage, the camping cot positioned next to the lawn equipment, the $40 weekly that was supposedly adequate to feed 2 people, the car taken away, the phone monitored constantly, the emails deleted, the communications controlled completely. He told them about the ladder and my ankle, about being told to simply walk off an injury that very likely was a serious fracture requiring medical attention. And he told them about the lies, the stories Veronica spread systematically about my mental health, the whispers that I was unstable, couldn't be trusted with my own baby, the calculated campaign designed specifically to destroy my reputation so thoroughly that if I ever spoke up, absolutely nobody would believe me. I watched faces change dramatically around that room. Church acquaintances who'd believed Veronica completely, who'd probably spread those exact stories themselves, looked genuinely sick. Neighbors who'd seen me limping repeatedly and never once offered help couldn't meet my eyes anymore. They'd all been fooled. They'd all played their part without knowing the truth. Veronica tried desperately to interrupt, called it lies and misunderstandings. A troubled girl making up stories for attention, but her voice was shaking badly. Her perfect composure was cracking visibly. Nobody was looking at her with sympathy anymore. They were looking at her like they'd never truly seen her before in their lives. Ronald tried a different approach entirely. He turned to his business associates, called it a family matter that got out of hand, said they could absolutely work it out privately without outside interference. One associate, a silver-haired man named William, asked one simple question. "Did you use your son's credit card without permission, Ronald?" Ronald didn't answer at all. His silence communicated everything they needed to know. Detective Cooper suggested gently that Ronald and Veronica come down to the station voluntarily, answer some questions, clear up these apparent misunderstandings. Derek spoke one final time. He looked directly at me through the camera with absolute focus. "Sarah, take our daughter and go with your father right now. I'll be home as soon as I possibly can. I love you both more than anything." Then he looked at his parents, the people who raised him, the people who'd stolen from him and abused his wife and lied directly to his face for 3 months. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't wish his father happy birthday. He simply ended the call. The screen went black, and Ronald's perfect world went black with it. I walked steadily to the door where Dad was waiting. He had my bags from behind the paint containers. Sophie's car seat was ready in his truck. Veronica grabbed my arm as I passed by her. Her nails dug painfully into my skin. She hissed that I'd regret this, that she had lawyers, connections, people who owed her substantial favors. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then directly at her face. This woman who'd made my life an absolute nightmare for 3 months, who'd smiled while stealing my money and starving me and freezing me and isolating me from everyone who loved me. I smiled at her then, a real genuine smile, the first authentic one I'd worn in that house. Then I said 5 words I'd dreamed about for months. "I'm not scared of you." I pulled free and walked into the beautiful sunshine. Behind me, Cooper was beginning his detailed questioning. Ronald was stammering incoherently. Veronica's voice was rising in panic as everything crumbled around them. I didn't look back, not even once. I climbed into Dad's truck, buckled Sophie in securely, and watched the Lancaster house disappear in the side mirror. The sun was setting, orange and pink streaking across the sky, like the world itself was celebrating with me. The next few weeks were a complete blur of legal proceedings and constant phone calls, but for the first time in months, every single update brought another small victory. Ronald and Veronica were formally charged 10 days after the celebration. Financial exploitation, fraud, identity theft. The prosecutor added additional charges once investigators really started digging thoroughly. Turns out Ronald had been skimming from his business partners for years as well. Smaller amounts, harder to detect initially, but they absolutely added up to substantial theft. By the time everything was tallied properly, he was facing both state and federal charges. His attorney told him to prepare for significant prison time. Veronica tried playing victim initially, told anyone who'd listen that she had absolutely no idea about the financial crimes. Nobody bought it for a second. The evidence showed clearly she'd been an active participant in absolutely everything. The cash withdrawals matched her shopping trips perfectly. The communication monitoring was entirely her project. The lies about my mental health were her deliberate creation. She was facing her own serious charges now. Victoria's situation was almost darkly funny. Her Instagram boutique had never been properly registered with the state. She'd never paid taxes on the $15,000 she took from our account. When investigators looked into her business thoroughly, they found a complete mess of violations. Her influencer dreams died the day the state tax authority sent her a letter demanding back payments plus substantial penalties. Last I heard, she'd moved back in with her parents, the same parents facing criminal charges.